Let's start into our program. So we're honored today to have Michael Blachly join us. He is the Chief Marketing Officer for the law firm Gray Reed. It has approximately 150 attorneys, and he brings more than 20 years of experience in corporate marketing, business development, corporate communications, which is primarily centered on driving business in the professional services sector. Michael provides Gray Reed strategic direction on the firm's business development and marketing initiatives and leads a team responsible for business development, marketing, branding, marketing technology, creative production, research, public relations, and events. He's collaborative, a consensus builder, and highly organized and a results-oriented problem solver. Prior to joining Gray Reed, Michael directed the marketing and communications for SMU Dedman School of Law. So he's a former person working in the communications group here at the law school. He also has his own consulting firm, Hamby and Blachly. He graduated from Texas A&M with a Bachelor of Science in Journalism and from the SMU School of Business graduate marketing program. So please welcome me in, or join me in welcoming Michael Blachly on speaking on building your personal brand to drive success.
Thank you, Eric, for the introduction and all that. Hopefully everyone can hear me and no issues there. So yeah, you got to hear a little bit of an introduction there by Eric and my background of being CMO for a law firm in Texas and more of my job history and all that. But at the end of the day, is that all there is to me? Is it just my resume that makes me interesting to you all? And the answer is probably no. There could be a little bit more. So let me just throw in a little bit more about me. I'm a Texan. I actually was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and I'm still there today. As Eric mentioned, I went to Texas A&M. I actually spent my first 2 years at Texas Tech, but I don't like to talk about that too much. And then I did get my graduate marketing degree certificate from SMU Cox School of Business. I've worked at these 4 companies, including SMU. My superpowers are these words, which I'll explain in the presentation. I've been married for 20 years to this beautiful woman. In fact, actually, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary in Boston and renewed our vows, and we brought a bunch of our friends and family together and had a great time. I have 2 kids. This is always the highlight photo. I'm involved in a number of organizations, and these being the main ones. I'm also involved in St. Michael's and All Angels Episcopal Church in Dallas, where my wife and I both serve as vergers, if you know what that is. When I'm not doing all that, we love to travel. Travel as much as we can. That's what we use the discretionary income for, is to travel. And a big part of that is I am actually an avid photographer. I love to take pictures, particularly of landscape. And so some of the work I have done actually is this, just so you can see it. I always have to have a reason to show some of my photography. But you know, when you travel, though, you do become a bit of a foodie, and I am a foodie. That's definitely me. I love to go out and eat, love to try new foods and cuisines, and I always enjoy having a nice glass of wine with that too, particularly a Oregon Pinot Noir or a New Zealand Pinot Noir is kind of my favorite. And then all of that is best done with friends. You know, we just have a great time. We're very social, like to have everyone over. Now, why did I tell you all about that? For starters, it makes me more interesting. At some point in time, I connected, maybe not with everyone that's listening right now, but I connected with some of you because maybe you went to A&M, or maybe you go to church at St. Michael's and All Angels, or maybe you're an avid landscape photographer yourself. And by doing so, we created a bond, which is hard to do actually through Zoom sometimes. But we nonetheless created a bond. We have a shared passion or shared alignment. And that's what makes us all human. That's what makes us interesting. And that's a big part of your personal brand that a lot of times we don't maximize, that we don't take advantage of because we're focused more on the professional side. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is your personal brand. What is it? How can you take advantage of all the components that are a part of it? And how can you manage it and own it and take it to the next level? Now, because of Zoom, normally I would say if we were all sitting in a big conference room, throw out your questions as they come and let me address them. Obviously with Zoom, it's a little more difficult. So we have the chat feature, and Eric has been so kind to kind of watch it for us. And if you ask a question that we definitely need to jump on, he's going to pop in and let us know. So if you have questions, utilize the chat, and we'll try and address it as we go, or if not, during the presentation, we'll tackle it at the end. We are hoping to have some good Q&A time at the end.
And let me say, Michael, thank you. We already have some nice comments on your beautiful photo, so thank you.
Thank you. And actually, the web address at the bottom and the banner at the bottom actually goes to my photo gallery. So if I'm boring you at some point, you can go check out the photography. So, all right, let's tackle what is a brand. Not necessarily what is a personal brand, but let's start with what is a brand, because a lot of people get a little bit confused on what they think a brand is. A lot of people think a brand is something like this, a logo. And that is a component of a brand, but it's not the brand. In fact, a brand is made up of about 4 different components. One is your brand strategy and vision, and that's really, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to tell the world about the brand that you are? And when I talk about brand right now, I'm talking about like more of a corporate brand. So what is a company trying to tell the world? And it could be something very simple, or it could be a little more complex. It just depends, and that's all part of the process, figuring out the messaging that's behind the brand. Another part of the brand is the identity, the logo, collateral, the website. All of that is the visual side of the brand. And that's what a lot of people think a brand is that component. And then you have brand presence and consistency. That's really, where is your brand seen? The target market. For example, at Gray Reed, we're a Texas law firm, and we will represent any company in Texas for the most part. But that's not necessarily how we really hold ourselves out. We really invest our energies into going into the healthcare industry and energy market and construction and real estate. Those are 4 key markets for our firm where we invest our time and energy and dollars and all that. And that's done through sponsorships and advertising, and also, and most importantly, human presence. I'm going to talk about human presence actually at the very end of this presentation, but it's human presence basically means people being visible in the place they're trying to develop business and build a brand. It needs the human connection in order for everyone to ever really make that connection. A classic example of this that I always use is that we represent waste management. Now, some of you may know waste management and some of you may not, but all of you have seen their logo on a very regular basis because they basically manage all the dump trucks and the dumpsters in the state almost. So, it's one of those things that sometimes that you don't notice the logo or the entity until you have a human connection to it, and then you're going to see it everywhere. Real estate companies are another great example of that. You see CBRE, it's a massive global real estate company. You don't know they exist until you discover it, and then you see their signage everywhere. You need that human component to make that happen. Final step is brand emotion. And this one is one that not a lot of companies really take advantage of, but I'll use another legal industry example. A family law firm might have a very different type of brand emotion they try and communicate than, say, a class action plaintiff's firm. One, maybe we're here for you, we're going to get you through this, we're here to support you and deal with this trauma that your family's going through and get it done in the best way we can. The class action plaintiff's firm may be more, we're the lion in the courtroom and we're going to, get as much of the other side, we'll beat the other side up as much as we can, or, more aggressive language. So no company does brand emotion better than Coke. If you saw a commercial from Coke, first off, almost all their commercials and their stuff is usually, you don't see them too much on regular television. You see them at ballparks, you know, when you go to a Rangers game, or you see them at the movie theater. You know, you see them at places where you're having a good time, where you're happy. And all their commercials are happy. They're happiness. They're talking about Americana or family or friends, or share a Coke with a friend, for example, is an easy example of that. So that's what brand emotion is. Now, all that said, I'm going to jump back one here. All these four components, though, at the end of the day, make up that it's what we strive to create in our brand. This is how we work to make a brand. But our brand really is actually the perception of our clients or customers. It's what they see as a brand that really is our brand. And this is important to remember because you can't be something you're not. I can't say that we are like the world's greatest at client service as if we're not delivering on that promise. A great example of a false promise might be United Airlines. I will admit, I actually don't know what their brand messaging is and their brand strategy is, but as much bad PR as they have and as much issues as they have, this damages their brand. And they can never say we offer great customer service because no one will ever believe it. So it's important to really own the brand that you are, whether it's a company brand or a personal brand. So let's talk about personal brands. What do we mean by a personal brand? Well, the CEO of Amazon said it best. A personal brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. Simply said. It kind of aligns to the perception thing I just talked about. And think about it. Think about what, if you were to walk out of the room, what would your classmates say about you? What would your colleagues that maybe you work with say about you? That is, in a sense, who your brand is. And it's, again, not just about your work, but everything about you. Let's talk about some significant brands that are out there, some significant personal brands that are out there. Oprah. I mean, she made an empire out of her name. Steve Jobs. He took his brand and Apple's brand and almost infused them together to where they were one and the same. Everything that he stood for, Apple stood for, and vice versa. Warren Buffett. It's got to be hard to be a personal financial advisor and be successful to the level he is, because there's thousands of them, not even thousands, hundreds of thousands of that group. They're all over the place. You have plenty to choose from. He is in a sea of fish that are all the same. And even if he's really good at what he does, that wouldn't have put him to where he is now. It took him positioning himself in creative ways to make that happen. And then, of course, all these I've shown you have been more about kind of their careers, and not always is that the case. Sometimes you're a reality TV star or Instagram. You're famous through Instagram or whatever. And I'll tell you, Kim Kardashian or any of the Kardashians probably don't do anything that isn't purposeful. They probably manage their personal brand more than any of the people I just showed you. They really know how to use it. So all those are big celebrities and things like that. What about you? Why should you care about your personal brand? Well, for starters, it kind of depends on where you are in your career, but a lot of you, from what I understand, are getting ready to graduate or have graduated. And fingers crossed, you all have jobs and you're getting ready to start off that path. Some of you may still be looking. And most certainly, if you're looking, a personal brand is a big part of the job search. Some companies will tell people, not to do any research. When I say, some companies will tell employees not to research when they're hiring someone. So don't go look at that person's Facebook. Don't look at that person's LinkedIn profile, whatever. Everyone does. If it's not the boss that's doing it, it's the other people. As soon as word gets out, everyone goes to Facebook, checks them out. But The interview process is honestly designed to get a feel for someone beyond their resume. Your resume gets you into the room. Usually, if someone's interviewing for candidates, you've already qualified in terms of your skills, what you bring through the resume when you get in there. Now it's just a question of who's the right fit. And your personal brand is a big part of that interview process and the part where they go and research you and look you up. So keep that in mind. But it's not just at the beginning of your career, it's the middle of your career too. As you move up the ladder, as you grow and get promotions or change jobs, all of this plays into it. It's not just about, again, who you are professionally. It's who you are personally as much in the same. And then finally, you've got those of you, well, the business development side. So I know a good majority of the call, I believe today, is lawyers or future lawyers. And if you're planning to go to a law firm, or if you are at a law firm, I can promise you at some point in the future, you will be asked to go and develop business. It's a part of being a partner at a law firm, particularly an equity partner. And they expect you to have that book of business before you become an equity partner. So it may be 2 years from now, it could be 4 years from now, or it could be 8 years from now. It depends on the law firm. But at some point, that will be expected of you, and you need to go out and start building. And if you're starting to build at year 8 and you haven't done anything, it's going to be that much more difficult for you versus if you start at the beginning, if you start now. And I'm not saying you need to go out and start really working to build business, but there are things you can do to build a good foundation so that when the time comes, you can start doing that more easily. I've obviously focused that particular question towards lawyers, but honestly, any of you, if you're going into a professional services industry, whether it's accounting or consulting or law or whatever, you're going to have a similar experience. And frankly, understanding and know how to sell and how to do business development is a really good trait. It's a good strength to have in your background. It allows you to be able to come into meetings, whether that's your job or not, and be able to articulate and develop and help develop business for the company you work for. So something to think about, and a personal brand absolutely is a big aspect of that. Okay. Still talking about why you need to consider and really focus on a personal brand. Here's another reason. Do you think this is true? If I do good work, the phone will ring. And again, this is probably more aimed for professional services. And the answer is absolutely a myth. In fact, it may have been true in the 70s and before. In the 80s, it's really started to disappear. By 90s, it was pretty much gone. And most certainly as we go into 2000s and today, it's history. It's ancient. And the reason why is because the world has changed, and it's always changing. And you need to kind of think about what's tomorrow look like as much as today. In the past, the reason why you could just do good work and the phone would ring is because there weren't that many of us out there. You know, the world was a simpler time in a sense. You know, my grandfather was a lawyer in Dallas, and he was one of the few that did SEC law. There just wasn't a lot of choices. Now, if I need SEC lawyer, I can find, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of them just in this area. So it's definitely always changing, and you got to think about, again, what does tomorrow look like, and what is changing that you need to be aware of. To give you some stats just about the legal industry, to kind of hit it home, in the last 10 years, the legal industry, just in the number of lawyers, has grown 15%, and that's across the United States. Texas pretty much mirrors that. So there are 15% more lawyers than there were 10 years ago. We also have the introduction of alternative legal service providers that are taking market share. And the big four accounting firms are pretty much toe to the line in terms of entering the market. They are ready to do it, and they're doing as much as they can that the law will allow. And outside of the United States, they're doing full service law firm type stuff in other parts of the world. So those are all game changers, particularly the big four, that are changing the way the practice of law is. And every industry is going to have similar situations. So at the end of the day, you need to figure out, how can you stand out? What can you do to kind of rise above all the others? So you may be wondering why there's a cow on the screen right now. I want to talk about Seth Godin. Seth Godin is an author who writes a number of books on marketing. And you see him on, if you go to Barnes and Noble, if he's got a new book, it's sitting right there, on the front rack. I mean, he's a very popular author, and his books are super easy to read. And he wrote a book called The Purple Cow. Purple Cow, the premise of it is basically, if you're driving down the highway and you see cow, 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 lots of cows, are you going to do anything about it? Probably not. I doubt anyone on this call would do anything because you've seen many cows in your life. You just keep on driving. But let's say you're driving along and you look over and you see a purple cow. You probably do something about it. You stop, you get out of the car, you take a picture, send it to your friends, text it, put it on social media, whatever. And the point of the book is basically, how can you be that purple cow? How can you stand out from all the others and be different and noticeable? Another factor that is really important to recognize right now is the era we currently live in with COVID-19. We can't network like we used to. We can't be visible in front of people. Normally I would be doing this, I think, in a conference room with y'all, where we can engage and I could see y'all in the eyes and look around. Instead, I'm communicating through Zoom. And this is a disruptor. Whether it's, no matter what happens, we're going to be doing business a little differently because it has helped people figure out working from home, for example. It's going to change the way we do a lot of things. So we'll see what happens, but that's just another factor in the game that we have to recognize. And then finally, the moment of truth. So the moment of truth is something you would have maybe experienced in the first chapter of your Business 101 class that you took maybe as a freshman or something. So the moment of truth is simple, very simple concept, but it identifies the key moments in a relationship that you have with someone when you're whether it's a client or a customer. And I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm buying a car. So first off, I need a car. Okay, that's the stimulus. That's my need. So what do? I need a car. I'm going to go to the car dealership. I'm going to meet the car dealer. So that's the first moment of truth, that moment when he and I first meet and experience each other. The second moment of truth is when I decide to buy a car. Okay, this is my car. This is the place I want to buy. And I bought it and I'm driving away. And then a little while later, after I kind of really experienced the car and experienced the entire process, is the third moment of truth. I formed an opinion about my experience with it all. Now this is super basic, but this was actually written in 1989. And this was very true in that time. But as time has gone by, we discovered, that's not really the case anymore. In fact, in 2010, they updated it. And now we have a fourth moment of truth, and it's actually the beginning. And they call it the zero moment of truth. And it is a period of time where we research before we buy. So all of you are probably very familiar with this. If you're going to go to buy a car, probably none of you are going to do, the first thing you're going to do is not go to the car dealer. You're going to go to the internet. You're going to learn about it. You're going to read. You're going to look up articles. You're going to look up reviews. You're going to find as much as you can before you ever set foot on the property. And that's a game changer. That's something that has changed the way we all buy. And in fact, 57% of the buying process occurs before you ever make contact with the group you're buying from. And this is universal. This is not legal. This is across the board. Everybody has a similar experience in different industries. So think about it from a personal brand perspective. Probably your first experience with someone may be through the internet, of them looking at your LinkedIn profile, or Google or whatever. It's, you know, before they ever talk to you, they maybe have already researched you. So again, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is figure out how can we stand out from the crowd? How can we be different from the others? And it takes really sitting down and defining yourself. And it also takes time. This is something that can't happen overnight. You really need to kind of think through it and figure out how are you going to be and what can you do to best showcase yourself. All right, that's the importance of personal branding. Let's break it down. Let's talk about all the various components that make up a brand. And we're going to talk about your personality, who you are personally, who you are as a professional, and your presence. Those 4 things. And you might notice that this actually looks a little similar to the 4 pillars of a brand. And they are very similar, actually. So let's tackle personality first. All right, personality. Why would your personality be a part of your personal brand? It's something you can't necessarily control. It's who you are, but what more is there to it? And the answer is, it's not about changing your personality or being something that you're not. Rather, it's, again, knowing your positives, knowing your negatives, understanding the best place that you can play, you know, knowing your talents. So you need to be in the right position to really maximize who you are. And how do you relate to others? This is a big factor, actually. How do you work with others in a group? How do you work with others individually? So, you know, all these various little personality traits that are out there. And a simple way to figure all this stuff out is through personality tests. DISC, Caliper, Myers-Briggs, all these are simple personality tests that will help you learn who you are. And you can do any of them on the internet. They do usually have a fee, I think like $30 to $50 typically. But it does help you learn who you are. Now that said, these types of personality tests give you an idea of these kind of traits. And these are just kind of general personality traits. But is that are all these things what someone might care about if they were looking to hire you? Some of these maybe, but maybe not others. Rather, what they probably care about are more things like these. Are you a leader? Are you a connector, organizer, charismatic? These are things that really, actually, as a group, make a difference. When I say as a group, I mean like if you're working in a group, these are the things that make a difference. And that's a lot of times what people start looking at when you're in the interview process, is if you check these things off. And these 2 types of personality tests are great tests to take to learn that. Style of influence and strength finders. They will give you a good result of the various personality traits and that can help in those ways. So, you know, why is this important to your personal brand? Well, you can't hide who you are, but you can maximize who you are. And that's really about it. It's owning those traits that are you. To do this, you really need to be open to self-reflection. You need to kind of think through it. You got to spend some time. Take some of those personality tests. See how they help you understand who you are. If you don't know a word, go and Google it. Look it up. Spend some time on it. Don't just take the test, quickly do the results, and then move on. And then learn more. If you want, spend some extra time. Take a few other personality tests. You know, I showed you some of those. Don't do just one. Particularly over time, as you go through your career, you're probably going to take these tests several times. It took me 20 years almost, but at one point I finally had taken them all. And I kind of said, you know what, whenever I take these tests, I always feel like it gets about 70, 80% of me. Like it hits me, you know, it just nails it really close, but there's always a small portion that I'm like, yeah, that part's not really me. So I actually said, you know what, let me merge all these together. Let's merge the results and see how it comes across. So I took all the tests, and I kind of looked and identified several buckets that the traits all fell into. How do I deal with goal and strategic thinking? How do I deal with projects? How do I deal with data? How do I deal with groups of people? How do I deal with people as individuals? And then how do I deal with emotions, whether my own or others? And I went through all the personality tests and I kind of looked for commonalities. And this is the results. Now, that said, part of that, as I was going through there, I saw some personality traits that really were consistently always coming up. And really, you know, when you looked at the summaries, they said, for example, highly organized. That's one that I'm very much, I know it, I can be a pain in the butt about it sometimes, but I'm really organized. And so I identified there were 4 that really stood out, and that was these. And if you may recall, I showed you a slide at the very beginning when I was going through the additional slides about me, and these 4 words are up there. I called them my superpowers. You may also have noticed when Eric was introducing me in my bio, it actually mentioned that I am results-oriented, highly organized, collaborative, and a consensus builder. It's in my bio. These are my 4 words that I really kind of hone on and try and let people know this is me. So know your superpowers and try and utilize the words. Okay, now as we go through this, I'm going to kind of issue some challenges. And you can do them now, or you can just write them down. And I can also shoot an email out afterwards. I can send it to Eric and he can circulate it to you all. But I'm going to have some challenges that you can think through. And you may not be able to do right away. But for this one, I want you to think about 4 words that describe yourself and what you bring to the table. But you can't use anything that's job-related skills, more personality. For example, in my case, the results-oriented, highly organized, collaborative, consensus builder. So that's one of the challenges, and I'm gonna have about 10 of these throughout my presentation. So if you haven't written it down, give that a shot. I'll pause real quick. Eric, are we good on questions? Anything I need to address right now, or are we good?
You're fine. You're fine, Michael. Well, let's say any questions. Let's pause here and just ask for anyone to ask questions or put them in the chat. Okay, let's go ahead.
Keep on going. All right. So that is who you are. How do you own your personality? Let's talk about who you are personally. And this is kind of all the other aspects of you outside of work. There are a number of things here: your relationships, your friends, your hobbies, community involvement, all that stuff. And some people, I can tell you, lawyers hate talking about this stuff, particularly at law firms. When they're working on their bios, it took a lot of work for us to convince everybody that we needed to incorporate a personal side into our bios. And the reason why is because it makes us human. It makes us unique and interesting, relatable. Again, in Texas, there are 80,000 plus lawyers. So if you're a litigator, you can assume that at least there's 20,000 probably litigators in Texas. There are commercial litigators. How can I stand out amongst that crowd? And I can be a great lawyer. That's part of the requirement. You got to be good at what you do. But beyond that, the personal side of me makes me stand out that much more. So it's something that we really advocated that we incorporate into our bios across the firm. Here's another one. If I had everyone in a room, I'd quickly say, show of hands, who knows what the airport test is? And I'd expect probably none of you do, maybe one. The airport test is something that consulting firms use in the hiring process. They actually, after meeting the candidates and everything, they come together and they simply ask, is this a person that I could do a layover with at an airport and enjoy it? You know, are they someone I would mind being around? Are they fun to be around? Are they interesting to be around? It's that simple. If the answer is no, then a lot of times consulting firms would be like, nah, you know what, let's not bring them on. So kind of keep that in mind, that your personal life can help your professional life. So the next challenge is simply list what makes you interesting in your personal life, and can you tie it into your professional life? So again, I'll just give this a pause just for a sec for you to kind of write that down, and I'll keep on going. All right, so that was personal. Let's talk about professional. This is the one that a lot of people have no problem talking about. Who's ever been cornered by someone who sat there and talked about all their what they do as a job, or if you ever go in for a sales pitch sometime on the receiving end, and the sales guy does nothing but talk about how great the company is and doesn't actually talk about what your problem is and how they can maybe help you. They just instead throw a bunch of information at you. And so you need to know who you are professionally. It's usually pretty easy because we ask everyone to make resumes. And so you've had to do that as part of your career of figuring out who you are professionally. And that's, these things: specialties, industry focuses, key knowledge, skills, abilities. All these are going to be things that make you, that come together to make you as a professional interesting. Now, that said, this is something I want to kind of try and think the best way to do this. A tip, I guess you could say, is I always view all the various skills that I have as tools in a toolbox. And you need to know how to use the tools, but you don't necessarily have to be an expert at all the tools. But you do need to be an expert at some of the tools. Now, what do I mean by that? If you have a chance, I'm going to use marketing as an example here. If you're in marketing and you have a chance to be on the website committee, where they're going to look at the old website, figure out how to upgrade it, and be a part of the making the new one. If you get invited to that, maybe you're not the web guy, but take advantage of that. Learning how websites develop and how it works can only help you later in life. I have a lot of skills that I don't regularly use, but they're really helpful to me as a CMO because I know how websites work. I know how PR works. I know how crisis management works. I mean, literally any of my team, if they get sick or whatever, I can pitch hit for them without a problem, with the exception of a couple of little areas. And that's something that's really helpful to do. So as you grow in your profession, take advantage of those opportunities to learn about the other areas around the skills that you have. Now, that said, don't stretch yourself out too thin. Still kind of operate in the realm you operate, but you also can't be a jack of all trades. You need to really, at the end of the day, still be good at certain areas, because that's what's going to help put you above the rest. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of just the skills and the abilities as you go through your career. The other side of professional, though, isn't just the skills that you have. It's the soft skills you have. And kind of going back to the interview process, your resume gets you in. The resume usually portrays your skills and your capabilities and what you've done in your career. But it doesn't often cover the soft skills. And the interview process, a lot of times, is trying to figure out the soft skills. In fact, the bottom four, I believe, the bottom left four, so leadership skills, time management, collaboration, and communication. Those are the top four skills that big companies look for, like Amazon or LinkedIn, things like that. So it's understanding what skills you bring and which of these soft skills are you. Now, you might notice that there's an alignment here to the personality test. So the personality test can help you understand what soft skills you bring. So again, another challenge. Think about 6 words that describe yourself professionally and what you bring to the table. But the caveat on this is that 3 have to be soft skills. Can't just be, loaded up with that, you're, for example, a lawyer focusing on bankruptcy and, you're in Dallas, Texas or something. It needs to be more than just that. So give it a moment to write that down and then we'll move on. All right, presence. We're going to talk about presence a bit because there's a number of different areas on it. So one is your style. How do you present yourself to others and the way you dress? Are you, sharp? Do you have good body language? How about the introductions? You may have heard of an elevator speech. How are you on that? Do you eloquently and efficiently state who you are? And that's the next challenge. Think about when you go to a party, if someone comes up and says, what do you do? Or they introduce themselves, what do you say? And the goal is to kind of come up with something that you can do like within 10 to 15 seconds, even 30 seconds is like the most. But how can you eloquently say what you do? And it shouldn't, and kind of again, using the legal industry, you shouldn't just say I'm a lawyer, commercial litigator, maybe even briefly getting, commercial litigator focusing on personal injury tort defense, something like that. So, okay, target market. Where are you going to be visible? This was one of the key pillars back there on the brand discussion. But this is an important one because, again, you can't be across the entire Metroplex. You can't be in all places. Even if you say, you know what, I don't want to restrict myself. I want to be able to take any type of business. It doesn't mean you can't focus in on a place to start really developing business. And so understanding the target markets is a big part of it. Now, as you enter the market, your target market might be the profession you're in. For example, as a young lawyer, it may be just, you know what, I just need to focus on the legal market. So you could join the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers or the Dallas Bar and go and be present. And that will help you grow as a young professional. But at some point, you got to transition from, you know what, I'm hanging out with people that will help me in my career to I need to start hanging out with people that will develop business. And so that's when you start shifting over to maybe where your practice aligns. So again, a lot of this, and I'm always going to speak from a legal industry perspective. So for those of you who are on the call that are not lawyers, kind of bear with me. Sometimes I may hone in on those areas. But at the end of the day, think about the target markets you have. Think about where your community presence is. Think about your profession's presence. Think about any industry presence that not where, when I say industry, I don't mean where you, like the legal industry, I mean where your clients are, or your company's clients are. Think about your passions. These are all ways to help build presence. And when I say passions, I mean there are people I know that actually...
I'm going to turn off this audio.
There are people that I know that always that can develop business through their passions. A classic example is I got an attorney at our firm that does it through hunting and fishing. He spends an enormous amount of money doing that, but he aligns it, and he's got a great following because of it. Now that's a hard way to do it, but it can work. All right, so think about this. Think about your target market, where you need to go out and build your brand. And it may change as you go through your career, like I said, but right now, think about where it is that the people you want to get in front of are. And it shouldn't just be a region, not city, state, or anything like that. All right. Creating presence. How do we get in front of those target markets? Now, this one is starting to venture a little bit away from personal brand, but it's still an important component, so I'm going to hit it just briefly. But being physically in that environment, networking, which is, of course, hard a little bit right now. Giving into that network. That's not just showing up and attending the meeting, but get on a committee. Be a part of the group that's hearing it. Be a part of the group that's planning everything. Continue the relationship. Stay in touch with people. And then, of course, thought leadership. That's going to be writing articles and giving speeches. Now, you may not be quite ready for that yet, but at some point, that is a great way to help put you out there and showcase who you are. The biggest thing, if anything, is that you've got to be externalized. Externalized versus internalized means, are you in your office are you out? And so you need to think, how can I get out of my office? How can I be visible again in the places where people are? So join an organization and get involved is the simplest way. Okay, challenge. How can you build presence either within your company, your industry, or the community? And just think of 5 actions you can do to make that happen. Pause here for a second. So, all right, online presence. Again, as a reminder, I mentioned it earlier, we live in an age where people research before they buy. And that is because of Amazon, it's because of Yelp, it's because of Google, it's because of iPhones. Because I can walk in a Target and I can see a toaster and I say, oh, I may be interested in buying that toaster because I need a new one, but I may Google that toaster real quick just to look up the reviews and see that that toaster's got bad reviews. And so I'll spend a little bit more money maybe for the toaster that's right next to it. We do that now because of the simplicity of it, the ease of it. And it's changed the way people buy and engage. So think about, I'll give you an example. This is Gray Reed, this is our website. 70% of the people that come to our website go to our law firm bios. They're not going to the contact page, they're not going to learn about the firm or any of our practice groups, they're going to the bios. So let me give you a little story of how someone actually finds a lawyer in 2020. And again, this can be similar to other industries as well. But so you have a problem and you need a lawyer. So you typically in the legal industry will get a referral. You'll reach out, ask around, and someone will refer a lawyer. Now, that's a very known trait. They say about 80% of business that a law firm gets is through referrals. And I actually think it may be a little more than that. So we get the referral. What do? Do they call up the lawyer? No. Next, they go and Google that lawyer. They look them up. And they maybe go and check out the bio. Or maybe they don't go to the bio, they go through LinkedIn, see how that is. They'll take a look at that. They'll start reading up on them. And ultimately, they're going to form an opinion and say, all right, I think I've learned as much as I can about you. You look like the person that can help me, and you get the phone call. Or maybe they look at your bio and they say, you know what, this is not the right person for me. I need someone that has a different set of skills or whatever, some issue or something, and you don't get the call. Or maybe they look at your bio and they say, this is good. This looks like the person I need, but I'm not quite 100% sold yet. So I'm going to keep on looking and I'm going to go check out these other places. Now, the key thing to take from this slide is that you didn't know they existed unless you got all the way to the end in that green box where you got the call. So having strong online presence is very important. So how can you do that? Take a look at your bio, whether it's on LinkedIn or if you have a company bio, or take a look at Twitter, Facebook, Google, all that, and really see how does it represent you. First start is to just Google yourself. See if you show up. In particular, look at the top 2 pages of Google and see what's there. And that would be the next challenge. Just simply to Google yourself and see what shows up. And if something's bad on there, then you may need to figure out how can we fix that. Sometimes it may just need to be cleaned up, and other times it's maybe great and you have no issues, which is good. Utilize those online bios. Again, LinkedIn is primary way for most everybody, but in the summary of it, ask yourself, does it answer these questions? Can you fix my problem? Will it make my life easier? Will I like working for you? These are tricky to actually do. The can I fix my problem is what most people focus on, but can you make my life easier? Will I like working with you? How do you put that into copy? And if you can, that's great. But it takes some thought. This is the time when you reach out and you call that communications, that friend that has a communications degree or the journalism degree or whatever, and see if they can help you with copy. LinkedIn, definitely need to address that. So I'm going to talk about 6 things every profile needs. and we're going to fire through these. So one, a picture. If you don't have a good picture there, get one. The good news is that one, you all live, well, most of you all live near SMU probably, which is a great setting. And two, most of you all have iPhones, and if they have portrait mode, that's a great tool to get a great picture. So if you don't have a good portrait, go to SMU, stand in front of the Tempietto or the fountain or any of the places on the campus that have a great background. Maybe do it on a cloudy day and shoot a picture with that in the background, and then play with it. Try different places, but ultimately try and get a good photo. Two, headline. This is a place for you to put really who you are, not necessarily your title. Mine has my title there, but, and I'll use lawyers as a good example. Don't just say an attorney at Gray, Reed, McGraw, or a lawyer at Gray, Reed, McGraw, or associate or partner at Gray, Reed, McGraw. Rather say commercial litigator at Gray, Reed, McGraw. Give a little descriptor of some sort that gives a bit more about what it is that you do. It does not need to be your title there. Your summary, we talked a little bit about that, but have a strong summary that tells your story. This is the place for you to shine. Contact info. This is the forgotten child of LinkedIn. Everybody kind of forgets about it, particularly as you move around. And it's a place for you to make sure it's updated. So have your website if you have one, most certainly have a phone number that you check, and absolutely an email that you check. Someone sends you something, you need to make sure you get it. Recruiters, frankly, use this a ton now. Employment and education history. This is important for you to fill out as well. I like to put in all the history, though I would stop it at the point of when you entered the profession. So for example, I worked in high school at Blockbuster Video, which I know just completely dated me. That's not on my bio, my LinkedIn profile. And then finally, volunteer experience. They have an area now for this. I would not recommend you put that in your professional experience because it actually can, when I'm hiring and I'm looking at LinkedIn, using LinkedIn as my tool to find candidates, when it's buried with volunteerism in the job history, it actually can get very annoying. Volunteer experience is a great place to put where you volunteered and your history there and your activity. And then finally, connections. Should you connect to everyone or not? My theory, first off, you do need to connect to people. It is social media. And you need to kind of put some thought into it. My general rule of thumb is, do I really know the person? If I met them at a meeting and we had a good time, I'm happy to connect. If you are blindly sending a request, I'm not sure I would connect. It really, the more in connection, the better. So kind of just be thoughtful because you don't want to junk up your LinkedIn connections to where it's hard for you to find, frankly, who you know. And then as a bonus, those are the 6 things, but as a bonus, engage. It is social media after all. And here are some things that you can just be helpful to share. These, whether you create them or not, whether you share other people's content, that's fine. But just, it helps you stay visible to the people you're connected to. So these are all things that are helpful to pass around. And then I do occasionally get the question, should I pay? My thinking is no. I don't think it's worth it unless you're really using it as a sales tool. If you are, great, go for it. But otherwise, it's not really worth the money to do that. All right, challenge here is just this is kind of where it's all going to come together. Take a look at your LinkedIn bio. If you don't have a LinkedIn bio, get a LinkedIn bio. But take a look at it and see if you have that strong summary that demonstrates your expertise, shows your human side, mentions those core values and professional values that we've talked about throughout this presentation. Twitter. Twitter is something that I find a little bit not helpful for personal brand personally. I think it's just good to kind of hear the current of thoughts on an issue. That's not one I really advocate as a great tool for building personal brand In order to be successful at it, you have to spend an immense amount of energy on it. Facebook is a great tool for personal brand. Just keep in mind that it is a personal forum. If you go on there and start talking about work, you'll have a lot of people hide you. And then the others. It depends on your profession, but most cases I would say Instagram and Pinterest are not, and TikTok are not going to be overly helpful for your career. YouTube can, but probably not at this time, maybe later. You have to be a thought leader in order to be really successful on YouTube. So all that said, that comes together and builds your presence, builds what you are out in the community. And all of this, your personality, who you are personally, who you are as a professional, and your presence comes together to build your personal brand. And the last thing I kind of want to hit on is beyond just you, is how does it interrelate into the company you work for? Because they actually come together. There's a symmetry to them. Steve Jobs, I mentioned him earlier, how his brand and Apple's brand were almost united completely. A company brand and yours, when they combine, allows increased publicity and visibility. It helps build organizational credibility. It helps increase engagement levels. It expands influence. Human connection to organizations that you're involved with helps the company. And the halo effect. If you know John and John's a great guy, and someone knows John, they may have good thinking, good thoughts about you, and vice versa. To visually represent it here, we have these circles. You know, the big one being the company brand. If all those little circles are the other people that work at this company, and everyone's kind of marching to the same drum, that brand expands that much further. So think about that as you get in your careers and the companies you work for. What can you do together? How can you work with the people you work with to build each other's brands? And a simple way is what I simply call as plus one. Who can you take? If you go to a networking event, take someone with you. Have a wingman, wingwoman. Go just be a part. First off, it makes it more fun, but it gives you something to talk to, and it helps kind of be a little more of an icebreaker as you network and talk to others. Also, writing a speech. Get someone to go with you. If you're going to write an article, have a co-author. All that kind of helps. So think about those you work with, whether at a law firm, at a company, or in the community, and where can you align your personal brands to theirs? So kind of in closing here, all of this is coming together to build your personal brand. At the end of the day, though, it starts with you. No one else is going to own your personal brand but you. No one. It is absolutely yours to do. Now, that said, you don't have to go it alone. You can always try and find someone to help kind of be a mentor or a coach. Think about someone who may be able to do that. There are a lot of mentor programs, particularly when you get into the industries that you may go work. For example, I think the Bar Association has a mentor protege program. But that's, and even within the company you work, but finding someone that can kind of help you and give you the hard truth as well as coach you and guide you. And ultimately, just remember that you're not defined by your profession. We're all human. We're all unique. And that's what makes us interesting. That's what will make us stand out in the crowd, is not, again, just what we are as a professional, but who we are as a human and everything that comes together. So kind of as a summary, know your superpowers and maximize them. Utilize your personal life to help your professional life. Know what makes you unique. Build visible presence through involvement or thought leadership, particularly involvement right now. Constantly update your bio on LinkedIn. Take advantage of social media, particularly LinkedIn, and align your brands to others when you can. And that is how you grow and build your personal brand. So, any questions?
Thank you, Michael. Let's have some questions now. Here's a question from the chat. How can a recent law grad showcase their personal brand credibly without having years of experience?
So if it takes time, if you are a law grad that is at a law firm, you just got to start building it up. Think of it as a rolling snowball. We all know that if you're a first-year lawyer, professionally, you're young. I mean, we're not expecting you to be the game changer in the courtroom or anything. But you can still start owning it. You can start thinking about things like networking. Again, like get involved in the AYL and not just joining it, but get on committees, be a part of it, start networking. That gets your visible presence out. And as you develop more as a lawyer, it will help you in terms of really taking advantage of that network. The other part is, as you do things, to frankly catalog them. If you work on a big case, make sure to put it in your representative experience list. That's a challenge as a legal marketer. Attorneys are not the best at logging their representative experience. So they'll say, oh, I'm great at doing X, Y, Z, but show me what you've done. Give examples of an X, a Y, or a Z. And if client confidentiality is a problem, you can usually get around it by talking, rather than identifying the client name, you just say, worked with a Fortune 100 car company to, an employment matters relating to non-compete, whatever it is. You can get around it, but it's all something that, we don't expect you to walk in as a superstar on day one. What other questions?
You have some other questions? I actually have one while everyone's thinking. So obviously we're working and living remotely, and that's by design, and it looks like that'll be the case for the foreseeable future. So what sort of things would you encourage us to do, or maybe you might want to elaborate on some things that you already discussed, that would allow you to be present and relevant in this kind of environment?
Definitely a good question. I think networking is hard. I mentioned that earlier. So I think I have viewed this time as a good period to build my foundation. A lot of the projects that we've been working on have been things that we have the time to dedicate to it and to build up. So for someone that is where you all are, it could be one, really spend some time to put together a strong bio. This is a time, even if you don't have the experience to necessarily talk about, you can start doing things like think about personality tests. I mean, even if you take a free personality test, you'll get some input. But spending some energy to kind of really think about who you are. Again, if you're a great writer, put together a bio, but if not, find a friend that is a good writer and have them help you put together a strong summary for your LinkedIn profile. And you can also, frankly, use that same thing on your firm bio if you've got one, or in the cover letter that maybe goes with your resume. But really spending some energy on that cover letter or on that copy. And cleaning up LinkedIn in general sometimes is just good to kind of go through there and identify who you know, and maybe get rid of some connections where you're just, you don't even know who they are anymore. Those are all kind of little things you can do right now. But yeah, it's tough right now because of the lack of ability to network. And I will say, here's one other thing, is this is also a good time to sometimes just learn new skills. Their webinars are plentiful right now. Sometimes we don't want to have another one in our day, but it's a good time to maybe sit down and say, you know what? I'll give you this great example. When I got to Gray Reed, I realized that for me to be successful, I needed to become pretty good at public speaking. I needed to get comfortable with it. Because I knew at some point I was going to be put in front of a large group of people. I knew I was going to be presenting to the partners, and partner meetings, things like that. So I just need to get much better at it. And so I purposely went and learned how to be a better public speaker. I gave some small presentations to small groups on things that were topics I was comfortable with. And now I'm pretty comfortable with any audience of any size to come up and talk to about the topics I know about. So kind of thinking about those traits, those skills beyond just, you know, the areas of law or the skills you've learned from business school or whatever. Think about other things that you might need, and this could be a good time to learn some and to spend some energy on.
Other questions? Well, I'm going to give you another one too while everyone's thinking. I've heard horror stories anyway. I'm sure Dean Sargent might have too, of students that had things maybe out there on social media or otherwise that were negative that maybe they weren't aware of or have forgotten about, or somehow became known later on and were embarrassing or maybe even jeopardized their employment. So what kind of, well, I mean, first of all, maybe the answer is don't put that out there anyway, but what should students be doing as far as a brand as it comes to things like that?
Yeah, I always joke that I have friends that I say that the filter doesn't work, which means that, you know, they'll say things without thinking. And saying was one thing, that's fine. Usually that doesn't go down in infamy, but when you put it in print or put it out there in a photo or something like that, it can be one of those things that can come back to bite you. So as a general rule, it's always good just to, before you hit submit or post or whatever, is to kind of ask yourself, is there anything in this that could come back to haunt me? And I honestly do that anytime I post. I always just think about like, all right, how is this going to be perceived? Am I okay? And that's a good rule to live by. Now that said, let's say time has gone by, you've got a history of some things that maybe are concerning. One of the things you should do is just a social media audit. You know, you can lock Facebook down to where it only shows, you know, basically your profile photos. You can even go into your profile photos and delete old ones and clean it up. That's a good thing to do right now. Clean up your social media. Clean out any photos that just probably shouldn't be there. Do you have a professional, you know, do you look professional even on Facebook? You know, if you're in a swimsuit, for example, I would probably get rid of those just to keep it professional if it's on your profile photo. So think about that. I'll tell you another story. We did, and the Google yourself is another one. So I was Googling around, actually I was doing this presentation to our firm, and I picked an attorney and I Googled him, just to one of our own attorneys, and you know, his search results were pretty good. He had no problems, nothing. He had a Twitter account though, and his profile account on Twitter was him laying on a pool raft, like selfie shot, looking down on the pool raft. And nothing was wrong with the photo. It just also wasn't necessarily professional. It wasn't not professional, but it could just be better. And so as someone who's out there and visible, I mean, I would generally suggest, and I mean, joked about it with him, to update his photo to something that's actually professional. So just doing an audit, cleaning it all up, spending a little energy there. Now, if you have something that's like written or is in a place that's hard to get rid of, that's a different problem. And hopefully no one has that problem because, I mean, we have had to deal with that with the firm where actually we had a negative review come in on one of our family law attorneys. And the funny thing is the negative review didn't come from our client, it actually came from the opposing counsel's client. So the person that was getting divorced from our client. So it should have never gotten out there, but that review kind of haunted her for a while. And we finally, the firm had to invest to kind of get it taken down. and spend some energy. So hopefully that doesn't happen to y'all, but that if that does, that takes a bit more effort to fix.
I would like to just add a couple of things just from my experience. One time I did what you said and I Googled myself, and it was interesting. There are these aggregators of data, but it was my resume with someone who was not me and definitely not me with the photo, right? So I think you have to watch for those. The other one I'll add, and this was part of my social media activity here, I was trying to tag a general counsel at a large local company in my Twitter post. Turns out he didn't have Twitter, but someone else did, and it honestly there were adult oriented sites that were related to his name, and so one of the things is just to somehow make sure that there aren't things that aren't even related to you that somehow could be found, that look like they're connected with you.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky when it's third parties. I will say another one that kind of comes to mind is sometimes there are and you mentioned the aggregator. Um, those exist. I haven't seen them as much as I used to, but like Avo, for example, is a common one that's in the legal industry, where they would kind of build a profile for you and then put it out there and be like, hey, we put a profile together. You can pay us money and upgrade it. And most of our attorneys didn't want to do that. What we ended up having to do is at least go and clean up the profile so that it was accurate. Didn't want to pay for it, but at least make it accurate. So that's another one to kind of think about as you come across things.
It's a great idea. So we have one final question from our chat. You mentioned intentional effort to improve your public speaking skills. So beyond gaining experience by speaking increasingly to large groups, are there any specific actions or resources you'd recommend that would help a person improve their public speaking skills?
Yeah, so there's kind of different categories. So you have your ability to just in general public speak, and sometimes it may be giving presentations within the company you work for, organizations you're involved with. It could also be as simple as joining Toastmasters. That actually is a pretty good way. I haven't done it, but I know people have done it and they find some good value, particularly if you're really uncomfortable with it. That's a good way to kind of get you into the shallow end and work your way through it. Other skills, though, that are helpful is honestly PowerPoint. To understand PowerPoint and some basic graphic design skills is actually, I think, pretty helpful for a speaker. The slides you saw today were all done by me. It's kind of my style. And it's something that is pretty easy for me now. Now, granted, I have, in my experience, I've had graphic design and doing that kind of stuff in my background, so it helps. But just at least knowing a little bit about PowerPoint and how to utilize imagery and taking advantage of things like iStock Photo, which is a royalty-free image website, or things like that, I think can help at least make it better when you're presenting. And I'll give one other very helpful tip relating to PowerPoint. Your PowerPoint should never, ever be your notes. If you need notes, if you need something to guide you in your presentation, have it in the notes portion of PowerPoint, or have it in a separate sheet of paper or monitor or something, but not be the PowerPoint. If I had done this presentation where I sat there and read my PowerPoint slides the entire time, everybody would be probably not even watching. You guys would have like moved on to better things. So definitely just that's like the cardinal sin of PowerPoint, is to do that.
Here's another question from the chat. You mentioned that your personal brand is what people say when you leave the room, but how do you know what they're saying when you leave the room? And what is your brand in that circumstance, and how do you work on it?
Great question. So I would say part of it is you're always guiding the brand. So part of it is having that strategy and coming up with like, here's what I want to strive to be. And by repetitious efforts, you will move towards that, assuming that you're not just completely wrong about yourself. That mentor coach I had mentioned earlier could really be helpful in that. And you know, just recognize that, particularly someone who can give you the hard truth. Karen Sargent, Dean Sargent, is on this call. She checked in with me right before and was like, hey, looking for your presentation. I said, yeah, me too. I'd love to know your feedback afterwards. So Karen, you've been charged now to tell me how I did. But it's, you know, things like that, having something that can help you in those ways. Again, just there are other little things that, we're kind of going back to the speeches. On speeches, if you want to ever kind of learn how you did, one of the things is to record yourself so you can see how you did. So like today, for example, is being recorded. So I could go back and just see myself. So that's another way to do it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think a mentor is one of the best ways to kind of have someone that can really just guide you and help you in those ways.
Great, thank you. Well, we're out of time, but this has been a wonderful presentation. And we really appreciate your contribution, your willingness to spend time with us, Michael. We'll provide your slides and information to our students if that's okay, and they may reach out to you if they have any questions.
Yeah.
And we'll also have the recording available too. So lots of ways to access the information that you provided. I would encourage people to go back and to do the tasks that Michael asked us to do. I'm going to do it myself and see what it comes out. So thanks again very much. We appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing everyone next Thursday for Ellen Farrell. Again, that one's Thursday, July 2nd, just before the holiday weekend, which hopefully nobody's really going too far away on. And that will be from noon to 1:30. The topic will be leadership and diversity and inclusion. So in the meanwhile, have a good week and keep safe. Thank you.
Thank you all.